overcoming adversity, doing it at all costs, making wins at all loss. Yeah, the world is all lost, yeah. Ain't no turning back, we headed straight for the stars, yeah. Oh yeah, we overcoming adversity, doing it at all costs, making wins at all loss. Yeah, the world is all lost, yeah. Ain't no turning back, we headed straight for the stars, yeah. Oh yeah.
Podcast where it's all about transformational growth mindset, being resilient with breaking the bottle for some of the things that we do bottle in. Before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, and like our channel. I'm your host, Michael Allison, and today I have on the show Dr. Christina D. Christina has over 25 years of experience in various business domains. She's the founder and CEO of Leaders Essential Group. She's a professor at Florida Atlantic University. She's also a consultant, facilitator, and mentor. And something that's really, really huge for me is that she's also a huge veteran supporter. Let's welcome to the show, Miss Dr. Christina D.
Hey, Michael. Great to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining me, man. I appreciate you being here. We met a couple times before, and I've been thoroughly impressed with like your background and just like your transformation that you had share with me. And I said, I have to get her on the podcast. I need to talk to her because I know so many people could resonate with her story. I know she's have a tremendous amount of success, but I know that story started somewhere. So as we get started, if you would, can you tell me how you got started?
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I'm a native Floridian. Parents are from Puerto Rico. My parents still live in the same house in North Miami Beach where they brought me home from the hospital with my brother. And so, just it's been such an incredible journey in my life when I think about, the main pivotal things that have happened to me. We shared and we discussed a few things when we were together, but really at the core of it as well, there was probably two very significant events that happened to me. One when I was 8 years old and another when I was about 16 to 17 years old that really shaped kind of the trajectory of my life. And good and bad that came out of it, but through grit and resilience and really by the grace of God, able to overcome some pretty difficult things to keep moving forward and pushing through.
Well, thank you for that response. I know that some of these things could be traumatic growing up, and it could affect us as we get into our personal and professional careers. So I just wanted to know, how did you approach your personal career and your professional career as some of these things did affect you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think I have to start early on. Research indicates that when you're about 8 or 9 years old, your personality starts to really develop. And for most of my life growing up, I was a very much, I think, an extrovert. Very chatty, very talkative. I still kind of am to a certain degree, but I really am right now kind of an introvert, and people are always very shocked by that. And I said, "Oh yeah, it's very difficult." But I think part of what happened is that traumatic event that happened to me when I was 8 years old did lend itself to continue and influence me not only in my personal life, but in my professional life. So I'll just give you a quick recap for your listeners. So when I was 8 years old, I think you're like, what, in the eighth grade? I don't have kids, not eighth grade, you're in the third grade. There you go. So I don't have
There
kids. So
you go.
not exactly sure. But about 8 years old, there was a substitute teacher that came in. And unfortunately, this teacher became very fixated with me during this class presentation. We were working on a craft, and I kept going up and showing, "Oh, am I doing it right?" and laughing, and he was joking around with me. And then at one point, when I was standing next to his desk, he leaned into me and said, "Oh, you're so cute." And even at that age, I knew that there was something wrong, with the
Wow.
situation. And I kind of got really taken aback, went home, and didn't really mention anything to my parents, didn't think anything of it. And while I'm home, I keep hearing my phone ring in the house, and my mom keeps answering and hanging it up and answering and hanging it up. And eventually, what ended up happening, she walked into my room and she says, "There is someone on the phone who says he's a friend of yours, but he sounds too old to be a friend of yours." And when I picked up the phone, lo and behold, it was this teacher who was disguising himself under the name of a classmate of mine. And it was basically an obscene phone call that he made to me. I ended up having to call the police. The police came to our house with a detective. They immediately did not believe me. So that, I think, started a lot of trust issues with people in authority, especially also with police at that time because I didn't feel that I was being protected. I got dragged into meeting after meeting with the principal and detectives that were coming to the elementary school. Unbeknownst to me, until about 2 years ago, my parents never even knew anything about that. I mean, I was raised that you respect authority. So I thought my parents knew that they were talking to me. And they were basically just trying to find a hole in my story. And I kept telling them the truth and how I felt that this teacher had gotten my phone number. And lo and behold, finally, they put enough pressure on this teacher and he admitted to everything of how he had located my files in the records at school. You know, this is long before computers. This is basically a Rolodex that sat on the secretary's desk and that anyone could have access to. And so that really traumatized me for a couple of reasons. I was the first time that I realized the vulnerability of being so young. Not realizing, I was born in 71. So, you didn't hear about, oh, people who are like pedophiles and all of these things. I mean, they existed, but you didn't hear about it as much. So it was my first experience at that situation. And that's where a little bit of distrust for people crept in and stayed with me and still stays with me for right now, if I'm being really honest. It's very difficult for me to trust people, but it's very difficult for me to lose trust in people because it stems back to that early childhood. And so that carries with you in all your personal relationships, that carries with you in your professional life as well. And it was a very difficult time. And I'm going to be really, really honest. When I was going through and reviewing a few things for this podcast, you do have a question. I know that you'll probably get to it about forgiveness. And I have to be honest, up until now, I've never really even thought to forgive this person for what he did and how he impacted my life. But more importantly, I think the difficulty that I have struggled with is that at that time, I had the choice to bring him to court, and I was too afraid to do so. And I was scared, and I didn't want to see him, and I begged my parents not to do that. And I have lived with that regret, and I probably will live with that regret until the day I take my last breath. Because even though I was only 8 years old, and people say, but you were so young, you were just a child. Even though I was only 8 years old, I felt that I didn't have the bravery or wasn't courageous enough. And I don't know how many other young girls that person hurt emotionally or even physically because I didn't stand up. And I think you have to take sometimes those regrets and you have to channel them into something different. Now I'm the kind of person, if I see anything going on, I'm the first person who stands up. I have no problem standing up for anyone, getting in the mix. People often say, "Aren't you worried about potentially being harmed?" I've actually encountered people where I've had to stand face to face with men who are being verbally abusive to women, and I say no. I said because I would much rather just be brave than to hide in. And I think a lot of that comes from that experience because I felt that I could have done something different and better.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. I'm so sorry that you even went through that experience. Just to hear it, it breaks my heart to hear that.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So let's unpack that a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, you know, hearing that you were 8 years old and going through this and what this person did to you, and I'm not trying to have you relive that or anything like that. I wanted to ask, being that it was maybe a struggle trying to convince people, about what you're trying to tell them, how did that affect you at that particular age when this is supposed to be your family and this is where you should go and confide in and talk to them? How did that affect you?
Yeah, so I will tell you, my parents were incredible. My parents believed me from the moment that it happened. I remembered specifically being in the living room with my parents and my dad opening up a phone book. Back then, you had the yellow pages, and saying, "Listen, in order for him to have known to call this house, he would have had to know the street that we live on because as a Latin family, we have a lot of common names. Jose is a very common name. It's a lot of Jose
Exactly.
Rosarios around, right? And my mom is Maria, it's one of those things. And they absolutely knew it, and they were unwavering in their support of this is we know that you're telling us the truth. And for me, it was unconditional acceptance and understanding and support from my parents. But then you have the flip side of the outside world that's looking at you and saying, "Oh, I don't know, but he told us that you gave him his phone number." And I was like, and I actually said it to the cop, an 8-year-old person gave him a phone number and he called it. Are you kidding me? And so it was just really, I think the difficulty was not very many people knew what was going on, partly because I didn't want anybody to know what was going on. I think in any type of grief situation, and I'm reading an amazing book called The Grief Recovery Handbook. I picked it up about 3 weeks ago. It talks about, we think of grief as death or divorce, but there's so many other aspects of grief that we can be going through. And a lot of times
Right.
we isolate from it. And I was trying to isolate because I was worried that even at that young age, I thought, well, did I do something that may have attracted him to me? And this is the problem. And now as I'm older, I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't at all. But I think that's when my personality changed. I think that extrovert girl changed and became an introvert during that really crucial time. And that has carried with me throughout all of my professional career, which is and personal, which has made it a little bit difficult to a certain degree. But now that I'm older and I'm able to adjust and adapt to it a little bit better, I learned how to work around it. But it was incredibly challenging for me to look at people in authority and to really kind of be looked down on and thought of in a negative way when I was the one who was actually on the opposite end of a very disturbing situation. It was just a phone call, but enough to change a really big aspect of my personality. And it was really sad that the people in authority couldn't recognize that and didn't dig a little bit deeper as fast as they could before the truth actually did come out.
Wow. So I know this was true, super, super, super traumatic for you. So as you dealt with that, can you share with me that difficult situation causing a setback for you, and what strategies did you implement and put in place as you were growing to become much more resilient?
Yeah, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I just kind of pushed that down as far as I could, right? I just pushed it down as far as I could. There was moments where, even as a family, like we've never really even kind of spoken about it and talked about it. And I think what ended up happening is, even though that was a very, very, very traumatic situation, I got involved in a relationship when I was about 16 that actually became the relationship that was the catalyst for change in my life because of certain other situations. I was young, I was insecure, um, and paid attention. The first person who paid attention to me, which is not the best. Not the best way to find a person, right? To connect with someone, but you're young. You think like, oh, I'm in love, and you don't really know what love is at 16. But I got involved in a relationship with a first boyfriend who actually, if I can think about it now, had a lot of similar tendencies. I felt that situation with that teacher, that substitute teacher, was really kind of emotionally abusive. Well, guess what? I ended up being in a relationship with someone who was very emotionally abusive. And you don't even realize it when you're into that situation. And that situation was incredibly volatile because I had such low self esteem. I didn't understand my worth and value, and I didn't see the incremental creep of what was happening in that relationship, the comments, the put downs. And it gets to a point after so many years that you actually start to see yourself through that person's eyes. And you no longer, you kind of lose yourself in that situation. And I would say, one of the most difficult situations with him, and I shared this with you over coffee, and I'm going to be completely transparent, authentic here with your listeners, is that, when I was 16, this first sexual encounter was not what you would think. I mean, I was screaming and my clothes was being pulled off of me, and I was saying, don't do this, don't do this. And listen, back then in late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, nobody ever talked to you about date rape. Nobody ever said, oh, your boyfriend can rape you. You always associated that with just somebody on the street that you didn't know. But, when I was being held down and that was happening, that was exactly what was taking place. And I will tell you that the unconscious mind, and the mind is just a mysterious thing. This is why I studied as a researcher as well. It took me 30 years, almost 30 years to come to that acknowledgement of what happened to me. And it was like one of these huge moments. And I think that the mind unlocks what it needs to unlock going forward. And that was when I was able to process things about it. I wish that I could say that that's the worst thing that that individual ever did to me. It wasn't. It wasn't. But what happened is that trauma, in addition to the trauma from my when I was 8 years old, just increased my heightened sense of I have to protect myself. The increased isolation. You build these metaphorical walls, and basically, I imprisoned myself in the walls that I put around myself to protect me. And so it impacted personal relationships. It impacted relationships with my parents. I was very, very angry. I didn't tell my mom and dad didn't know about this story until about 2 or 3 years ago. And I held so much in for about 7 years that it was just eating me up. It was affecting my personal relationships. Um, it was affecting how I interacted with people. And I think that was the pivotal moment for me because it was at that moment that I decided, you know what? In every relationship, there is an outcome. And there's a common denominator in all of these outcomes, and it's me. And it's because I'm not dealing with all of the trauma and the hurt in my heart because I knew how incredibly difficult it would be. And I didn't want anybody getting in there and moving anything around because I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. And that was what the transformational moment was for me in terms of change, in terms of reaching out to a Christian counselor and really just having like 6 months of weekly, really difficult conversations where I had to get into some really deep and dark things that, and
Mhm.
some things I share and some things are just between me and my God. But I had to go through all of that because I wanted something different. I didn't want to stay in the pain and the hurt, not to say that it doesn't come back and you don't think about it, but I didn't want to be ruled by it. I listened to a podcast recently and I actually wrote this quote down. I had no idea that I was going to even say it to you today, but it says, "There is a pain that hurts you and there's a pain that changes you." And when I heard that, I said to myself, it's up to us to figure out if that pain is going to change us for the better or if we're going to stay shackled to the pain of the past.
Wow. So this occurred to you not once, twice, and then you said some other things occurred after that. I know that brought tremendous pain to you,
Mhm.
and just to hear that this turned into rape, I was wondering if what was it that caused you to bottle this in for so long as you grew into being an adult?
Yeah, at the time, I didn't even really see it as that. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I mean, this is my boyfriend, this is this, "Oh, don't you love
Mm,
me?" All this craziness, and then I even stayed with him even for many years after that because at this point, you're just so blinded by it. So, it's almost like I didn't realize the pit that I was in. And it wasn't until, probably 2012 or 13, no, maybe a little bit sooner, that I really just had this kind of like aha moment with like, "Oh my gosh, like, I can't believe that this is really what went down." And I stayed in that relationship because I was so emotionally beat down that I he actually convinced me that nobody would want me. And
mm,
because of other things that he had done to me, which I prefer not to discuss on the podcast, but because of that, I kind of felt that as well. You lose your self-worth in that whole situation. But I will tell you that those I went from pain and crying, and there's a progression, to anger, right? And when you let anger fester for so long, man, that turns to bitterness. And when you've got bitterness in your heart for someone, that is really, really hard for you to keep moving forward because you can push it aside for as long as you can, which is what I did. But when it rears its ugly head, And I really had a really big, difficult time actually even thinking about forgiving this person. Like, how can I forgive somebody who's done so many terrible things to me, things that are unspeakable that I won't even talk about? And I remembered reading this incredible book, The Power of Praying Woman. And it said, you don't extend forgiveness to let the person off the hook, because I think that that's really what my whole goal was. Like, if I in my heart forgive this person, then I'm basically, am I saying that what he did to me was right? And in this book, it actually said, no, really at the core of it, when you extend forgiveness, you're releasing that person to God. God will take care of him. And then you have to heal yourself. So, I will tell you, I haven't run into him recently, but, back in the, a few years after that, I ran into him and I was like, hello. I mean, because there's a freedom in it. It doesn't mean that you're still not hurt sometimes, but there was a great analogy from a pastor that said, everybody has a hate bus. We're going around, life is good. We're having a good time. Everybody, I think I know I shared this with you, everybody's having a great time on the bus. And then all of a sudden you get to a stop and the person who has caused you the most pain gets on and you are angry and aggravated and you can't even think straight. And they are having the time of their life and they're having this grand old thing. They don't even know that they're on your hate bus. Just pull up to the stop, open the door and literally push them out, kick them out. And someone said to me, but kick them out nicely. I was like, no. Sometimes you just need to drop kick people out of your life. You just need to do that little swift kick, drop them out and move forward. Because the person I am today wouldn't be the same person if I hadn't gone through those traumatic events. I wouldn't be able to connect. I wouldn't be able to talk to people. I wouldn't be able to basically empathize with people who've maybe been in similar situations. And I wouldn't be able to say, yeah, it was tough and it was terrible. But at the end of it, if you really, really have faith in God, you know that he can turn everything into good, even if it's not the best. I can say, okay, these situations happen to me, but I can also be honest with you and say, look, I put myself in situations where I made bad choices and I suffered some pretty bad consequences for them. But even in suffering those consequences and acknowledging my role in some other areas of my life, that's how you find commonalities with people. And that's how you basically overcome. You just have to be more self-aware about what's happened and whether or not you're going to stay and remain in that pain and be bound to that circumstance, or if you're just going to say, you know what, I think it's time to move forward. No one has really ever heard about the story of me and that situation with the date rape. No one really knows about the situation with that teacher. And I think part of that is because deep inside of us, some of us want to hide and we want to isolate and we want to protect. And then I think of, in First John, there's that verse that says, God is light and in him is no darkness. And if we hide, if you believe in God, you have to believe that there's a devil, there's that, and Satan as well. You can't go one without the other. And, he's not really original. The devil, he's always going to go to your weakest point. So if he knows
Right.
that you're hiding deep, dark things, and that's where he's always going to go to. But once you bring it out and you start talking about it and you bring it into the light of Christ, it's just so much easier to just move forward and live your life and see if your story impacts one person in a positive way.
Wow. I think that we isolate so much and we bottle so much in. I could hear that from your story. And I know that at some particular point you had to move forward to where you're at now today, to being who you're with now today. So at what particular point did you get to that level of forgiveness where you could say, now I could date someone and I could participate in this relationship 100% and be authentic in that?
Yeah. I think that, I probably went through that and got to that point of forgiveness a long time ago. But it's still always, even though you forgive people, sometimes, I'm realizing that there's the unconscious behaviors that guide ourselves that we're not always aware of. So there is always, this self-guarded individual that I am. And so I recognize that, I know that, and I've carried that into my relationships. I've been married for 20 years, and my husband and I have been together for 22. He knows everything, about me, the good, bad, and the ugly, all of those things. But I also recognize that, I do have tendencies to isolate myself and protect and guard myself. And so I have a very, very kind of like tough interior wall. And that's something that is not as big as it used to be. But from time to time, given circumstances, because life is hard and marriage is difficult and things of that nature, I can actually acknowledge that when that wall is starting to come up again. And then I have to really have the self reflection to say, okay, like I need to work through this thing. I need to talk to somebody through this. I need to process what this grief is like, what's happening to me. And so I can't say that it just in a snap of a finger, it just all got better. I think it's just a journey. I think grief and healing from traumatic events is a journey. And I think that no one can tell you exactly when it ends. Sometimes you just have to keep going on the path, and life is good. And sometimes life is a little challenging and you just have to redirect and pivot and adapt to figure out how to manage it. Right. And I think for me, I've had 2 grief instances in the last 5 years. I lost my Aunt Annie, who was like a second mother to me. I lost her to cancer. It was very difficult to watch her die. And then I lost my fur kid, Rex. And people say, oh, it's just a dog. No, it's just a dog to you. But he was very special to me and my husband for 16 years. And we just lost him January 14th. He got his fur angel wings. And that has triggered a lot of emotions with me again. And so I talked to a counselor like 3 weeks ago, and she started to ask me some questions, and she recommended the Grief Recovery Handbook that I mentioned earlier. And she goes, if in the first 10 pages it doesn't grab you, then just put it down. And that's when I started to realize, wow, it's much more than just losing my aunt and losing my fur child. There's also unresolved grief that I have to get through. And one of them has to do with this teacher from so many years ago who had such a big impact. And that really came to me today when I was preparing and answering all the questions that you had given me, that I haven't really worked through that.
Wow. So I love the fact that you brought up that you can self-identify whenever things are like flaring up for you. And we're speaking about your husband, and you said that you're transparent with him and you share things with him. I just wanted to know if you could touch a little bit, like, what is the importance of that support of having someone like that with you as they go through this journey with you?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. When I feel sometimes if I feel triggered, by my aunt's death, it's usually certain times of the year. Um, I know like I'll feel angry for no reason. And now, I went through grief share and I did all of those things. I realized that there's a trigger point. I may not know what the trigger is, but then I can say to him, hey, listen, I just need you to know something has triggered me. I feel really angry, but it's not at you. And he knows. He's like, okay, I get it. I understand, because sometimes he would say, are you angry with me? I'm not angry with you. And even when I'm not angry. I'm not mad. Why are you asking me that I'm mad? Even my voice, I'm like, there's something going on here. But when I did the grief share, it was a 13-week program. It was faith-based. They say that there's 139 like symptoms of grief, and I think I had like 49 when I first started with them. And it was great because memory loss was one of them. So I have been struggling with memory loss since I lost Rex. So there's, post-it notes and iPhone alarms like crazy going off in the house. Like my husband makes fun. He's like, you have an alarm for everything. I'm like, yeah, because I have to remember it. I got to remember to go to school and teach. But no, seriously, I recognize that when I start to have memory loss, I know that it's because I'm triggered. And I believe that, losing our fur kid Rex has triggered a lot of other things in my life because, grief is hard and you cry an ocean of tears and then it brings up other things. So I think it's important that you have to have the difficult conversations. And, if you're with somebody and you're married to them or in a relationship, I think you do have to tell them about you. Tim knew everything about me before we were even engaged. And I remember I was like, sit on the other side of the room. I'm going to tell you everything about me. And he got up to like console me, and I'm like, sit down. Arguing myself, and I was guarding myself, like, I'm just gonna let you. And I said to him, if you just want to be friends and walk away, that's great, no problem. But you need to know who I am. And I think that you have, and it's hard to be vulnerable, and it's hard to share those things because let's be honest, there are things that I have done that I have deep regret and shame over. Do I want the whole world to know that? No. Do I want to hide that forever? Of course I do. But I think when you find the right person that you can be honest with, that's the most crucial thing. And you have to be very careful about who you open yourself up to, because you just never know how it's going to turn out.
Right. I love the fact that you guys have a great amount of trust amongst each other, and that was before you guys even got married, up to this many years of marriage. So congratulations to you guys for that too.
Oh, thanks. It's marriage is not easy. I'm not going to pretend like it's perfect. It's got its ups and downs. I make the big joke with him like, he liked me because I was Puerto Rican and feisty, and I was always very confrontational, and I liked him because he was, nice and quiet and very calm, and now he wishes I would be quiet and I wish he would speak up, right? All the things that attracted you so many years ago will drive you crazy when you're like trying to get into it, right? So you have to just understand that there is no such thing as like perfection in marriage, right? It ebbs and flows, and but you really hope that you found the life partner that you can do life with, it even in the difficult times.
Nice, nice. I love it. I love it. As we get ready to transition from this segment of the conversation, I wanted to ask you, based off your experience, some of the things that you discussed, what is some advice that you would share with that person that may have been going through some of the same things that you've been through, that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I really, really believe I tried to do a lot of things on my own. I thought that if I just ignored it, if I didn't discuss it, if I didn't face it, that I would be able to manage my emotions because I have a strong personality. And really, I have to say that that brought me to the end of myself. It's just kind of this constant like running and running and running and running, and you get nowhere, and you're still hurt and you're still in pain from it. And really, at the core of it was I recognized that I didn't have the capability of inner healing, right? There's just no way that I could do it. If I could have, I would have already achieved it when it had happened. And really, that's when I had to really do the soul searching. And I realized that the only way that I was going to be able to heal myself and for myself personally was really just taking everything to God and having someone alongside me who was also a faith based Christian counselor who could help me through that transition. And I remember her name was Leonie Williams. She passed away many, 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 many years ago. And I remember I walked into her office reluctant, but I walked in because I realized that I needed a change, right? And I've been married to my husband for 22 years, but I had a couple of divorces in between there. When the last divorce happened, I was like, I think I need to fix myself. There's something wrong here, right? And I was super reluctant. I remember we sat across a really big conference table, and I thought it was kind of strange that we were going to be there, but she knew what she was doing. And she said, if you commit to coming in, I will work with you. And we will talk about things that are going to be very difficult. And when you talk about them, I want you to leave them right here. And she pointed to the middle of the conference room table. I want you to leave them right here. Everything we talk about, all the pain, you leave right here. And then you're going to let God take it. If you think that you are going to reach out metaphorically and bring it all back to you, there's nothing I can do for you. And I thought, man, she is super harsh. But she knew that that's exactly what I was doing my whole life. Talking about my pain, being upset about my pain, and then burdening, laying it all out there and then taking it back because somehow I felt like I deserved to carry that. So for anybody who's really going through any trauma, that if you are engaging in that same thing that I'm doing, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to really, really make the burden even harder because now you keep reliving and you keep taking it back. And for me, I had to really get back to my faith and not be angry at God for the circumstances that had happened because I made choices that led to some of the circumstances that hurt me in life. And I just read, I'm listening to a book that says, look, just own 1%. If you could just say, just own 1% of it. I could have chosen a better boyfriend. I can say, like, use that 1%, right? That it makes it a little bit easier that it's not 100% on somebody else. And so I would just say, do the work. I know it's hard. You don't want to deal with it. Healing is not pleasant. I'm just going to give you a realistic job preview like an HR person would. Like, it's going to be really hard. But if you can endure and if you can get to that other side, even though it's painful, it will be so worth it because all of that hurt will continue to hold you back like it did for me for many, many, many years. I wish that I had done it sooner, right? And I wish in my life, I had someone say, no one ever regrets coming to Christ. I just regret not coming to him sooner. And I'm like one of those people that resonate with that. I really wish that I would have been able to give that to God long before I did so that I could have spared myself a lot of years of torment because I really was tormented.
Well, thank you for such wise advice. And it's so amazing whenever we surrender these things to God that how it just release and just create a sense of peace. And that's what it's done for me.
Yeah.
I resonate with some of the stories that you shared about some things that took place in your childhood. Kind of same things happened to me as well. Not same story, but some things like that. Been divorced, so I understand some of those things dealing with the counselor. So I appreciate you sharing that and giving us that bit of wisdom. Minus some of the things that took place that you did share, if you would tell us a little bit about what was like, what was what was it like growing up with like your mom and dad or siblings or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in Miami, family, Puerto Ricans, loud, all together all the time. I grew up in kind of like you're more sheltered as the daughter. You're kind of a little bit more. I have since I study bias both positive and negative. I can say maybe this is a negative bias of mine, but I always felt like, oh, my brother could do anything he wants, and I'm like under lock and key all the time. So it was an interesting dynamic going forward. I was raised to be tough and independent. I grew up in kind of a rough neighborhood, and but I also grew up and didn't realize a lot of the sacrifices that my parents made. I think sometimes when you're young, you just don't get it until you're older. And my dad came from a very dysfunctional home, and he decided he was going to break the generational curse that his kids would not grow up the way that he did. And that's a really like incredible thing to do because you have to find inner healing in order to be able to do that as well. My mom sacrificed a lot as well. My dad worked, lots of jobs. He worked really hard, and at night he would work and he would work on cars. So when I was like 8 or 9 years old, even 10, even up until like high school, like I was pushing cars. Like people are always like, you have this brute strength. I'm like, that's because I've been pushing cars, broken down cars from my front yard into the back into the garage so my dad could fix them, right? But I think what happened is in those moments, I created this like incredible bond. I'm very close to both of my parents, but I have this like love of cars and I have this love of being out on the boat and scuba diving. Like my dad was my scuba diving partner when I was 15, going fishing and all of these things and working on cars and muscle cars and all that stuff. And I think it was in that time of where I learned and found my love for muscle cars, which my dad and I still have that. I had a really nice like souped up Camaro when I was 17 that he restored like from like it was a rust bucket. I have he restored a beautiful Chevy Del Rey that, basically sits in my garage. I drive a muscle car now. I finally went back to a muscle car. I've got a beautiful Dodge Challenger. I mean, and he and I were in January at the Mecum auction in Kissimmee, and we're just like in awe of like all of these cars that are worth so much money. And so it's been really, really amazing. I didn't always have the best relationship with my parents. I think as teenagers, just like, oh, just leave me alone. I can live my life. And we both, all of us struggled in my 20s. And a lot of the struggles too were because I was going through my own inner turmoil. And I just
Right.
hated the world and I hated everything, everybody around it. And then I had like a really big moment with my parents where I just sat down with them one time. I said, look, this is what after I had done my healing, misdirect. I'm like, I know I'm not the perfect daughter. I know I haven't done it right. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, right? But this is who I am and I can't change who I am. And I'm sorry that I've let you down. And I remember my dad crying for the first time. I hope he doesn't get upset with me for like calling him out here. I doubt it. But I remember my dad crying and it was the first time and he said, "Baby, you never let me down. I felt like I let you down as a father because I didn't protect you." How could he have known what to protect me from? How could
Right.
he have known it?
Right.
And I think that was the pivotal moment where the family, my relationship with my parents was so fractured that's where it came together. I don't even know why I'm getting upset, but but yeah, so it's all good. We're heading out to the Keys. I'm going to turn 52 on Saturday. They're coming to the Key West with us. We're just going to hang out in our little trailer that we rented and have a good time. And I think that also is a great story of reconciliation. It's not just about forgiveness where you can reconcile the hardness and the things that have happened to you towards people who have really harmed you and who will never apologize for it. It's also about reconciling broken relationships that God can restore. And that includes family, parents, siblings, anything is possible.
Well, let me be the first to say happy birthday to you.
Thank
Um,
you.
also, you know that I'm a car lover. I'm not sure if you saw that on the intro of the video. So I love restoring cars too. So I think we have a similarity. I love muscles car. Growing up in Miami, that was the thing for us. So
Hmm.
I
Oh,
I always
yeah.
wanted to own a antique car, and I was lucky enough to purchase a '75 Impala and restored it. And I'm
Oh,
super proud of the work of that.
beautiful, beautiful. You'll have to bring your Impala, and I'll have to bring my Chevy Del Rey to the next meetup where we have it at the coffee shop.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, wow, I love the story that you have with your dad, and I think it speaks so much volumes to having that sense of forgiveness and recognition and reconciliation when you sat down with your family, and like kind of like I would say like stepping into your own and like owning your stuff and owning like all the things that you've been through. So I think
Mhm.
that's amazing. If you can tell me a little bit about like this journey that you've been on. How has that impacted your emotional well-being and your mental health?
Yeah, so I think that this journey that I've been on for it just seems like forever, um, really has helped to propel me to kind of just have grit and resilience and just keep moving forward. You know, when no one understood in the 70s about test anxiety and all of these different things and making accommodations for students, which I have to tell you, I think it's amazing. But growing up, I really struggled in school. I never felt very smart in school, and I would understand material, but the moment they gave me a test, it was like poof, like something a switch just turned off. And so I really struggled so much that I actually started skipping school in 10th grade, got kicked out of one high school for excessive truancy, got put into another one. And, I had some family members who said, "Oh, you should just go get your high school, like your GED. You should just get your GED." And it was in that moment where I was like, no, like I've had an epic failure, right? And an epic failure with a Latin family. That's a whole nother level, right? Right?
Absolutely.
And I was just like, "Oh, you shame the family," kind of thing. And uh, and part of that was I was like, "No, I'm like determined. I'm determined." And I think what happened is now I'm haven't been in school for most of my sophomore year. I show up at a new school. And I'm sitting with a counselor, and my mom is telling everything that happened. And the counselor, wisely was like, "Okay, thank you, Miss Rosario. I'll take her from here." And then she just looked at me, and her name was Miss Sue Edmonston. I'll never forget her. And she was like, "Okay, let's see what we're going to do." She never judged me. She never criticized me. She gave me her schedule. She said, "Look, I know you don't know anyone here. This is back in high school when you could actually go out to eat." And she goes, "If you don't know anyone, just bring your lunch and come in here and you can eat in here with me for as long as it takes for you to meet some friends." And she made a pathway for me. I was only 15, so she actually got approval for me to take night school so that I could earn credits because I had really lost a lot of credits. So during that sophomore, junior, and even my senior year, I went to school during the day. I went to night school at night. I was in summer school both every year. All that skipping got me nowhere except, more time in school when I was trying to get away from school. And I remember that it was high school, like senior. And again, I'm hiding this from everybody. Like nobody knew what was going on because, you feel kind of shameful about it.
Right.
And the assistant principal said, no, she's not gonna walk. I had skipped and gotten caught a couple of times, and the vice principal got yelled at by my mom, and that didn't really work out well for me. And so, and I remember when I got caught and dragged into the office, my mom was having a conversation, and then I walk into Miss Edmondson's office, and she just smiled at me. She's like, Christina, go back to class. And I think really she had such an amazing pivotal role for me. The assistant principal said that she's not going to walk, and she just went to bat for me. Like I remember sitting next to her, and I thought, I've gone like, okay, I haven't been perfect, but how am I going to explain to all my friends why I'm not walking across the stage? And she was like a dog with a bone. And she basically told him, like, if he didn't let me walk, that she was going to escalate it. I mean, she was such an advocate for me, like
Wow.
incredible for all of those years that we were together. And she believed in me when no one else did, not even my family. And so when I graduated, fast forward, a couple years back, probably like 10 years back, I was doing a Bible study that says, who was a great advocate for you? And I remembered her, and I put on Facebook, does anybody know how I could reach her? Got her email address, sent her this whole thing about like how she influenced me, and how if it hadn't been for her belief in me, I would have never graduated from high school. So how does a girl barely graduate high school with like barely a C average? I mean, you can't fail a whole year if you're going to get out there like an honor student. Go on to get a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degree, and a doctoral. It's because somebody advocated for me and somebody believed in me when no one else did. And I reached out to her and I said, you will never know how much of an impact. And she said that she was just retiring from school. It was her last week, and that she didn't remember me, because I said, you might not remember me. She's like, I don't remember you, but you were worth the fight. And that is what really what she did really has made me a better person, a better friend, a better teacher, a better advocate for other people. To see, sometimes you have to see more than what is at the surface of what people are going through, and really kind of just fight for people and see the value in them going forward.
Wow. That's a truly inspirational story. I want to follow up, and since someone sort of paid it forward for you, how have you felt empowered to like pay it forward to like other people that has been through some of the same things that you've been through?
Absolutely. So, I never knew that I was going to have a career in academia. The girl who skipped on lunch is like a professor. Like, it's good and bad. It's good because I'm like, I know what y'all are doing. Like, you can't pull anything over. You can't pull the wool over my eyes, right? So there's the good part of that. And I think what has happened is that I've always, I really, really thought that my full-time profession really was going to be in full-time academia. I mean, that's where my heart was, connecting with the students. My prayer every semester is that I just want to have an impact on one student's life. I want to speak life into them. I want them to learn business principles, but I also want to have an impact on them, because you can let people know that you're different, and they can see something different in you, which is the light of Christ, which doesn't mean that I'm perfect. Like, I mess up, I blow it all the time, I stick my foot in my mouth, but at least I'm like, I own it. Okay. I'm 100% responsible for this one. But people and students will genuinely know whether you're being real and authentic with them. And I think that we make a big mistake between 18 to 23, 24. We think that they're adults, and they're not. Their brains are still forming. They still need guidance. They're looking for that, especially now more than ever. They're looking for someone to care about them, to notice them, to understand the nuances. Like, you've been doing great, and all of a sudden I don't see you anymore, and you're failing. What's happening? And so, I've had the unique opportunity to really be able to kind of speak into the lives of people, to give them encouragement and hope. And, I've had former students, I usually hear from them when things are a little bit rough, which
Mhm.
is good,
Right.
right? And so, and sometimes when things when they're coming out of something as well. And I've had a student reach out to me at 12 o'clock who was suicidal, and I was on the phone with the student for till 4 or 5 o'clock, counseling and doing all of these things. Students, to talk to them and pray for that person, and reach out to that person's mother. Another one who just reached out to me, just I haven't seen the student in 4 years, who said, listen, I've made a traumatic change in my life, and my life is better, and I'm getting married, and I would really like for you to come to my bridal shower. You were a huge influence on me. And that is what it's like. That's what it's about. It's about really speaking life into people and being genuine about it and paying it forward. Lots of people have helped me, personally and professionally, and I do feel that it's it's a privilege to be able to do that as well. It's a privilege for me to be a professor, but I'm also a business owner. It's a privilege for me to be able to work with my clients and have my clients trust me with their employees, and also be able to help them advance. And all of my training that I do is always personal and professional development. I always intertwine both of them. And I always do the same thing. I always pray that God would help me to impact my clients and my clients' employees as well, for every single one.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I heard a lot of things that it sounded like you bottled in. I heard
Mhm.
isolation. I heard unforgiveness. I heard shame. I
Mhm.
heard um, some resentment. I
Mhm.
heard some grieving, and I thought about all those things, and it sounded like you suppressed them and put them in a bottle, and you put them away for a good bit. But it, from your story, at some particular point, you said, "I'm going to break this bottle, and I'm going to make a transformation." I want to
Yeah.
know, what was that pivotal moment in your life where you decided that I'm going to change?
It was in my mid 20s. So I would say I was probably 24, 25. And I decided that I didn't want to live with this incredible regret and pain anymore. And I just decided I don't want to be the person that I have been, the angry person, the bitter person, the person who is resentful of everybody, the person that people are afraid of. I always tell people that I have an ability to be able to destroy people with my words. I think you need to know the darkness about you as well. And in that time, that really came out because that was all coming from a place of anger and protecting myself and lashing out on other people for things that had happened to me that I was bottling up for so long. And then I just realized, after that, do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live this life anymore. I don't want to walk around being broken anymore, because that's what you really are. You're broken. And you just have
Right.
to get to the point where you just decide, I don't want to be broken anymore. And I'm going to do the work that requires it. And I'm not doing the work to save a marriage or save a relationship. I'm doing the work to save myself from any future hardships, and from carrying this incredible weight that I didn't need to carry all that time. And so that was the pivotal moment for me in the 20s. And there's been other pivotal moments and breaking points that happen. This is life. It's just a journey that you go through. But that was the pivotal moment. I was like, I have to end it now. And I really wish that people would recognize that sooner rather than later, because I know some people who are still 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, still haven't been able to break through and overcome the traumatic events of their life. And that is such a shame, because there is freedom at the end of it, but you have to want it.
Wow. Thank you for that. If you would, could you share what what skills did you gain to implement into your life to become like habits to overcome some of these adversities that you were facing?
Yeah, so I think the most important one was I had to do some inner reflection and self-awareness. So, everybody talks about emotional intelligence, and I think people are emotional intelligence fatigued. Everybody gets fatigued. You start saying things too often, and people are like, "Oh gosh, we keep hearing that." But really, at the core of it, I think that you have to have the inner reflection, right? You have to look at yourself, and self-awareness is a foundational skill, not just for your business life, but it's understanding your emotions and how your emotions influence others and how their emotions influence you as well. And I think part of that, one of the keys of me being able to continue to move forward and deal with the anger management issues that had fractured a lot of interpersonal professional relationships and hurt me in my career, I ended up having to realize, again, even in my professional life, there's a common denominator. If I'm leaving every job and I and we all hate each other, I'm the common person in that problem. And so, right? I had to own that. And just over like the last 10 to 12 years of my business and the journey and working in my doctoral studies and then starting my own company and really doing a lot of the training on what we call the neuroscience of leadership, this self-awareness. Like, you cannot truly be effective as a leader or even in your truly successful and even in your personal life if you're not self-aware of all of the things and you don't have self-management. Like, you can't manage your own controls. Now when somebody loses their mind or gets upset with me, for the most part, depending on who you are, I can really be like, no, this isn't about me. But I also recognize that I'm much more tolerant with external forces than I am with internal family members, and I have to be cognizant of that, right? Like, if I need to practice what I preach in all aspects of my life, and when I blow it, I just have to own it as well. So, the self-awareness, all of those things, understanding relationship management, understanding the neuroscience of how our brain works, what triggers us, the unconscious mind, which is so fascinating for me. All of those things are what actually have helped me to kind of step in and keep moving forward. I'm the kind of person, like, life hasn't always been easy. You get kicked down. I have a mantra that I tell myself. Okay, Christina, this is bad. You're just gonna lick your wounds for 5 days. You're gonna eat all the pizza you want. Your milk chocolate, Cadbury milk chocolate, roasted almond, and all the regular Coca-Cola, because I don't believe in the diet stuff. Like, just do everything you want, right? Just have a pity party for this week. And at the end of the week on Friday, you're gonna pull it together and you're gonna move forward. And any setback, any failure I've had, any situation that's been really hard for me to deal with, that is how I process it. I'm like, okay, let me sit in it. And then I get a little bit angry, but then I realize from my previous experience that if I don't deal with that anger, it could turn into resentment, and I don't want that. So what I do is I sit in it. When I feel the anger come, I actually will transfer that anger into momentum to push me forward. And that gives me much more grit and resilience because I'm incredibly stubborn. And if I have a goal in mind, I'm like, I'm going to achieve it. Even if nobody believes that I can do it, I'm going to do it. And that's pretty much how I've kind of progressed to where I am right now, right? Even in my doctoral journey, people didn't understand my research. I remember standing in front of the class. I had 6 slides I had to go through. I didn't even get through slide 2. I didn't get through slide 2 because I was trying to process what I wanted to do. It was all new for me. And a couple of military guys got really offended with me. Like, one even decided that he wouldn't speak to me for the rest of the program. And my research is investigating interviewer bias, either for or against military veterans, by U.S. hiring managers, where I measure conscious, social, and unconscious biases in the interview process for this segment of the population. It's incredibly important because I had read research that said that 1 in 3 HR managers still view and are hesitant to hire veterans because they fear they might suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people, even not military veterans, who are dealing with that. Life-threatening illnesses, sexual assault, all these different things.
Correct.
And I was trying to get it out and I couldn't. And they stopped me, my time ran out. I stood up there and as calm as I was trying to act, I was dying inside, right? I was just so upset inside. And I remember walking to my seat and one of my colleagues like, that was great. I said, how could it be great? I didn't even get off of slide 2. Like, how could it be great? And he said, no, you showed grit and resilience. That whole drive home, nobody knows about this. I don't really keep in touch with very many people from the program, but that whole 3.5 hour drive home from Orlando back to my home, I cried pretty much the whole time.
Wow.
I left that room, went to the bathroom, almost cried. I was like, pull yourself together, Christina. You can cry on your 3-hour ride home. Got into the car, like everything was great. And then cried all the way home. Cried to my parents on the phone. They prayed for me and encouraged me. Cried to my husband. He was like, you're going to be fine, baby. And you know what? That made me so angry at that situation that I was like, oh, no, no, no. Now I'm going to get it super concise. And then I got connected with an amazing faculty mentor, Dr. Bob Ford, who has been an amazing mentor for me from an academic perspective. And he helped me to put all of those ideas into like this meat grinder and spit it out. And that was a pivotal time for me in that journey, because a lot of people don't finish doctoral journeys. They start their ABD, all but dissertation. They're just like, I'm out. I'm not doing it, but that was a pivotal moment for me that helped move me forward. And I felt like it was a failure, but I just turned that into something that would help me to keep moving forward and propel me forward to do what I needed to do. And happy to announce that I have my first official peer-reviewed article publication, and my hardcover book that I'm one of 11 authors who are looking into forgotten minorities and military veterans is one of the articles that's in there. I'm super proud about that.
Thank you for that. I know the veterans absolutely will love that too, and knowing that you're supporting the veteran cause. I love that you were resilient and showed a lot of grit, because not too many people do finish their doctoral, like you said, and some of them will go years, and
Yeah.
still do not get it accomplished. So congratulations to you on that.
Thank you. Thanks.
I want to ask you that you've come this far on your journey, and you've mentioned that your spiritual base, right? So I want to understand, how did your faith played into like finding your purpose to what you're doing
Mhm.
now today?
Absolutely. So, I grew up with my parents dragging me to church, kicking and screaming, right? Super bored all the time. And, they didn't have all the fancy stuff they have now. Like, you went to children's church and then you sat in the big church and, you just tried to occupy yourself. And I remember I fought it for so long. My parents dragged me there. Even when I was 18 years old, they're like, sorry, you're still going. And if your friends sleep over, guess what? I don't care if your friend is Jewish. She's coming to church with us, right? That's just how it rolled in my family. Flashpoint, my friend who was Jewish, Rose, she actually used to go to church with us. She's actually a Messianic Jew now. She came to know Christ many years ago. And she saw the influence that my parents had and we had as well. But my faith, I went to church because I had to. But I was really no closer to God than anybody off the street. I was just going there because I was told I had to go through the motions. And even early on in my 20s when I was going, there was a bit of a disconnect for me, because I think I was still harboring a lot of resentment towards God for circumstances in my life that had happened. And I had a disconnect a little bit between, who you are, who your heavenly Father is, right? Like, God is not up there like with a bat trying to beat you over the head, right? But that was the perception of God that I got growing up in churches, where it was all fire and brimstone and you're always on your way to hell. And I thought, well, if I'm on my way to hell, I might as well have some fun while I'm doing it, which is a stupid thing to think about. But I will say that I probably, when I was about 28 or 29, was when I rededicated my life to Christ. And then that became the moment that I had my relationship with him, not because I was being dragged by my parents. And I always think about, all of the scriptures, like my verse that I always tell people is Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And that is really one of the ones that I really think about all the time. I think about, where it says Psalm talks about, I think it's in 139 where he talks about, like, I knit you when you were in your mother's womb. Like, he knows you, he knows
Yes.
everything about you. So why wouldn't this God who created the universe, why would I not think that I'm, you're not worthy of his love. I think that when I finally rededicated my life to Christ, it wasn't because I didn't think God could love me. I just didn't want to give up control of my life
Right.
to God because I have control issues. I am a control freak. Like, I don't want anybody telling me what to do. No one, including God. And that was really what held me back from him, because I know that his love and his forgiveness is unconditional. And I accept that. I know some people struggle with that. Some people struggle. I don't know if God could really love me. I don't know if he could really forgive me. I'm here to tell you that that's a lie from the pit of hell. He absolutely could. You just have to accept that gift and do it. So my faith has been incredibly pivotal in my life. Just learning, and even in hardships, when I think about it, I think of, Jonah, and I did a study by Priscilla Shire. She was amazing. And I thought, Jonah, like how good is this going to be? And there are moments, if you think about Jonah's life, there's a storm, right? There's a fish, there's a scorching wind, right? And the sun,
Right.
and then there's a withering reed, right? And when I looked at that in my life, I can see, well, sometimes I came through a storm because God had to, like, I was so focused, like, this is what I'm doing. And God's like, oh, no, you need to go over here, but I got to create a storm for you, right? I've got to create a storm to get you here. And a lot of times, there were things that were uncomfortable. And I thought that I was going to be in full-time academia. And the last university that I was with for like 3 years, that door closed. And sometimes when God closes the door, like, I saw a great meme that says, don't try to pick the lock. I kept trying to pick the lock. I'm like, God, I kept saying, God, give me a sign. I'm like, after the third time, I was like, I think I need to pay attention. I think I need to leave. And that withering reed was really kind of like the death of the future of what I thought I would do. And I remembered someone spoke to me and said, you think that your impact is in this classroom with students. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but I think that your impact could be even greater in organizations. And when she said that to me, and I resigned from the university, people actually thought it was crazy. Like, other academics were like, you resigned, you're a visiting professor of management, and you resigned. What are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. But God knows. And when he reveals it to me, it's going to blow my mind. And it actually worked out that way. I started my own consulting company. My first client was an $89 million nonprofit that fell into my lap before I even had a company registered. Like, that is by the grace of God. The impact that we had there. My second client is huge, huge company. We did 400, employee training from the C-suite level all the way down. Like, that's only by the grace of God. And then now I'm back in the classroom and doing consulting. So I think, you have to see that in life, my faith has been very important to me because it's guided me. And although I've never had an audible voice of God, God has always answered all of my questions. He's always answered all of my things. And even in the hardship of having to walk away from that position as a visiting professor, that was very difficult for two reasons. Number one, I really wanted to be there, but let's be real, pride and ego. When I would sit around and I would tell people, oh, I'm a visiting professor of management, they would look at me and they were like, oh, wow, that's impressive, right? I go
Right.
from this position to, like, I'm a doctoral student, right? With no job, and I don't know what I'm doing. And in that hardship, so I just want to speak this to anyone in those moments where life is uncertain and you don't know where you are. There was the day that I realized that things were coming to an end for me at that university. I read a devotion by Chuck Swindoll. And in that devotion, I'm just going to say it really quick. It said, and God replies, because I was heartbroken, right? He replies, my daughter, I know what I am doing. I know the pain of your heart right now. And I know that you feel overwhelmed, overloaded, and pressed down. But believe me, I am touched with your situation and I have a plan. And I am working out the details of your deliverance even now. Just trust me. And less than 8 months, that's when everything fell into place for me.
Wow. Wow. Amen.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that you chose to follow the path of your faith and your belief. And what I really, really like was that you chose to be business partners with God in life and in business. And so many
Mhm.
doors opened up as I thought about that.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
So, in addition to your faith, I heard you mention you had a mentor. And if you would speak a little bit to maybe your mentor and the importance of having mentors in your life.
Yeah, so my first mentor was someone named Richard Borzum. He was my first official boss when I was working for my first like professional career. He was amazing. He really understood my personality and knew how to navigate it very well. And he always said, Christina, the one thing I want you to focus on is I want you to learn how to be a successful single. So what he was telling me is I need you to learn how to stand on your own, and I need you not to be so dependent on other people. The second person who's been great from a professional standpoint in terms of my academic pursuit of my doctoral journey was Dr. Ford. So Bob Ford got partnered with me. It's interesting how it all worked out. Like I prayed and asked God, like, just please give me a good, give me the right person. And interesting, like I have such an amazing relationship with him. And Dr. Ford reminds me a lot of my father. Very dry, sarcastic personality. I banter back and forth with him. He's incredibly tough on me, and he challenged me and he pushed me because he saw that I could do it. Right. And I was, the difference between feedback and criticism, I say this to people all the time, is how you hear it. I heard that on a podcast many, 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 many years ago. And so I never took anything that he said to me, even when he was really, really hard on me, like, what are you thinking about with this paragraph? It makes no sense. But I knew that I needed to yield to his expertise, because if I knew how to get through a doctoral program, I would have done it. And he was a very accomplished person. Till this day, we still stay connected. He's a co-author, one of the co-authors on the article that just got published. We're still going to be doing research and writing together. And really, he helped me to evolve into being a better researcher and to really seeing things from not just a theoretical perspective, but then how do you translate that into a way that someone who isn't a scholarly academic, like a practitioner or a company, would be able to understand and see the value of that. And he is the one who believed in me enough to to give me a connection to the editor of the journal that I'm actually being published in. And she, Dr. Diana Stone, has been an amazing mentor to me as well. So for me, it's about giving back. And so that's why I also feel that it's important, if you've been mentored, if you've had great people who have spent countless like hours with you, like Dr. Ford has probably he spent years with me. I think it's your responsibility to be able to give back in the little ways, for your students, for your family, for your friends, for people you see in need, any way that you can. For military veterans, like I want my research to really open some awareness for them. I want to be able to bring recognition to the HR community that there are still positive and negative biases that need to be dealt with. I want to be able to do what I can to help military veterans in terms of transition and impression management, and how to put together a resume that makes things that a civilian can understand. And so, and at the core of that, a lot of what I do, I don't get paid for that. I don't get paid for my research. I don't get paid for all of those things. And I don't care about that, because I'm not in it for the income. I'm just in it for the outcome. And so that is the most important thing to recognize in mentoring, back and forth.
Nice. I love it. I think mentor is key. I've had a good bit of mentors throughout my life as I moved through different phases, and they have created a blueprint and a shortcut to like almost every step in my life. So I know that
Mhm.
importance of having a mentor. Um,
Yeah,
so you've done a lot, and you had a transformation in your life, but you even took it to another level. You said, "I'm going to be a professor, and I'm going to start a business." So if you
yeah.
would tell me, why did you start a business? How did you get into business? And what impact has it had on you so far since you've been starting a business?
Absolutely. So when I was a professor, I'm going to be completely honest. I actually decided that I was going to incorporate, because I knew from an HR perspective that I couldn't have a gap in my resume. So I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. So initially, it was kind of a selfish motivation. I was like, I'm just going to incorporate. I'm going to leave this last university. I'm going to focus and be a 100% doctoral student. And I'm going to just say, hey, I'm a founder of my own thing. And that's going to help me, because I also recognize that, if research shows that if you've been out of work for 3, 7, 12 months, there's a percentage of decrease that happens in your salary. So I wanted to make sure that was taken care of. Well, that was a selfish motivation. And then I was reading a devotion that said about entrepreneurship, and it says, you don't start a business for yourself, you start a business to help other people.
Right.
And in that moment, I knew, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I remembered talking to people like, hey, I'm going to start my own consulting company, but I didn't tell anybody when. And I remember one of my professors, I was having lunch during the doctoral program, and she said, Christina, consulting is very difficult to get in if you get an opportunity. And I know you want to wait till your doctoral degree is done. If you get an opportunity, don't say no. You have to take it. You just have to work with it. I was like, okay, no problem. Literally, like an hour and a half later, I'm having lunch with one of my colleagues from the program who says, hey, you mentioned to me that you wanted to start your consulting program. Oh, I know exactly. I have a project I want to hire you for, and I think you and your colleague here would be great for it. And little did this colleague mine, Sue, know that I had already in my mind knew that I was going to reach out to Vera, and I was going to ask Vera if she would like to be part with me, and she would like to be my colleague on one of these things. So that's kind of how it all evolved. I literally, I had a client before I was incorporated, and so that's where it all came from. And then my second huge client came from a referral from someone from that same program, who had basically watched me for 2 years. See, people watch you. You don't think so, but people are watching what you do. They're watching, how are you conducting yourself? How are you? And people can figure out very quickly whether you're authentic and you're being real, or you're just trying to put on a facade for people. And these two people watched me for almost 2.5, 3 years, really 2 years. And that's where it all came to fruition. You know, they saw me give presentations. They saw who I was. They saw how committed I was and how dedicated I was to the program. And that transfer, because that's who I am. I'm dedicated to everything I do, whether I'm teaching in the classroom or if I'm teaching clients or at a conference. You know, even here, like I did a lot of like reading through questions to make sure that I understood exactly what was going on, because I think it's important. I think it's important, and I think that you have to. If anything that we've learned in life right now, more than anything else, we just need to be real and authentic to be able to connect with people.
Yeah, that's what my mentor and coach tells me. We meet weekly, and she was telling me just show up as your true, authentic self, and the rest will follow. And true enough, what you said, whether you know it or not, people are always watching what you're doing, even though on the sidelines
Absolutely.
or beside you, they're always watching what you're doing.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, since you've been in business, can you share with us some difficult moments in your business journey that you face, and what you and your partner have done to overcome some of those things?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, I started the business and it was fall of 2019, and then boom, COVID. February 2020. I was like, wow, perfect timing, right? By that point I had a project with my first client, and then it actually worked out that I ended up getting a second project from that same client that was going to carry us over. But once that project came to an end, uh, the well dried up, right? And there was no there was nothing in sight. Like we couldn't, nothing was happening in the consulting side. And so then I decided, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I've got some business funds saved up. I'm just going to go ahead, and I said, we're just going to keep moving forward. I'm just going to keep, paying as much as I can. Let's just start setting the stage for where we want the company to go. So we just started to do that kind of strategically. My colleague and I, and at that time, we had another amazing person who was working with us named Victoria, and that's what we did. And so I depleted all of my personal savings, all of my financial savings for the business side, and then my husband and I said, I'm gonna have to close it. He's like, no, 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 throw some money in there. So he's like, toss some money in there, right? And to keep it going. And I was like, okay, okay. And by this point, it had been 6 months of not having any income, and a lot of money going out. And you get to the point of escalation of commitment, like when is enough enough? And at that point, last year in 2022, that's when FAU said, "Hey, do you want to be an adjunct professor for us?" And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is God redirecting me. Maybe He is drying this up. Like, we are in the desert. Maybe He's drying this up because now He wants me to have a different trajectory and go back into teaching. And it was really difficult for me because I felt like I had the weight of the people who worked alongside me on me. And when I got to the point where both my husband and I said, okay, look, I think it's time. Like, we just can't keep investing financially into this. That was really difficult for me to have to tell them. I had told them in meetings, like, look, the time is going to come where I'm going to have to say, I'm not going to be able to pay you guys anymore. We're going to have to stop. And these two women were like, even if you can't pay us, we will still keep working because we believe in what we're doing.
Wow.
And that was incredible. And I remember texting them. I didn't even call them. This is a terrible moment, but I didn't even call. I was sobbing so much. I'm like, it's come to an end. Like, there's nothing left. And we had been working with a client to try to get them on board, like from February. And it was like February, March, April. And then you're like, this is never going to happen. And I said, I just need to just let go. I need to let go. And I said, we're just going to have to stop. And they were like, no problem. And then literally like 2 days later, the client emailed me their signed contract. And I'm like, we're back. But that was tough. And like, my colleague and I, Vera, we pray before every meeting. We pray before every presentation we do. Faith is very important for her as well. And my company was built on biblical principles. And so it was really cute because, like, you got to be real with God. And I'm like, God, we need money. And she was like, badly. Like, we need you to make a way at this point, and he did. But that was a very difficult thing to think, oh, I think I'm going to have to close this down. And I was like, okay, this is when that's going to happen. But God, in his perfect timing. And I like to tell that story because I was like, and then I got the contract, and then I still had to wait 15 days for my first deposit. So I was still broke for another 15 days. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? That was a lot of pressure, I imagine, for your business and for your family, and you withstood that. I do think that you were being tested at that particular time in that
I'm
moment.
sure.
Your business was
Absolutely.
built on faith, and you were being tested to see who do you believe in, see what were you going to do about it, and true enough, you did that,
Yeah.
and it worked
Yep.
out. So I know that you're in business with another woman and you guys are partners. So I wanted to know, what is it like to be in business as women in the business space? Could you share what is that like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of see it as I don't really I know that I'm a woman-owned business. I
Hmm.
know that I am a minority because I'm Hispanic, but I don't really think of it that way. Um, I'm very strategic and intentional about the clients that I work with because
Hmm.
I want to make sure that you know this company is not just about quantity, it's like quality. So it's like 1 to 2, maybe 3 clients at a time where we believe in their values, right? And the mission and what they're trying to do, because I think at the core of it, that's really important. And yes, she and I are both women. I'm Puerto Rican, she's Brazilian. Um, but at the core of it, I don't see I don't see that it's limited us in any way. And even if it has, even if it's never spoken, I'm okay with that because if people don't want to work with me for whatever reason, uh, they're the ones who are missing out. Because
100% agree with that.
I really care for my clients. I understand their business in a way that some people like, do you work for them? Are you sure you're a consultant? Do you work for them? I'm like, yeah, because I think that's the customized, really in detailed approach going forward.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, since being in business and operating at a optimal pace, how do you balance your personal life and business to focus on yourself, your self-care?
Yeah, I don't. I don't. I mean, it's totally honest and transparent. I'm a workaholic. I don't do it well. The only time I balance it out is when my body finally shuts down and I'm really tired and I just need to sleep for a couple of days. I wish that I could say that I had like this super magic formula for it. I don't. And I was talking to somebody, actually a client of mine, and I was like, At this point, I'm 52. If it hasn't changed now, it's not going to. Do I understand the importance of it? I absolutely do. But I have not figured out how to manage it well. So there are times where I am running myself into the ground, where I'm running from one thing to the next. And there are times where my life is very quiet. And then there are times where my life is very, very chaotic with so many things. And what I do is I just pray and ask God to help me embrace the positive chaos, because a lot of things that are happening are positive, right? It's positive that I'm here sharing my time with you. I got to be able to teach. I'm going to be on like a client call the moment we finish. I've got a client call afterward. It's a lot. I haven't even had lunch, but it's positive chaos. And so I just keep trying to remind God, like, help me to embrace the positive chaos, and try to. I try to turn off my brain, but it doesn't work. So I'm going to be really authentic with you. I haven't figured out how to do that well. I haven't figured out how to take care of myself well. I haven't figured out how to eat healthy. And so it's just, this is just who I am. It's been like this for a long time, and maybe one day it'll get a little bit better. But for now, that is still a very big struggle for me, that I'm not sure I'm ever able going to fully 100% overcome.
I'm gonna tell you what I think. So I'm
Mhm,
exactly the same way, and I think the entrepreneurial spirit puts that in you. But I'll also say
mhm.
that's rooted based on like probably like your upbringing too. Because I imagine you said you saw your dad hardworking, and
That's true.
that carries through. And I just thought of that for myself. Like that's what I saw my dad do.
Mm,
My dad was a hard worker. He was holding three jobs. You know what I mean? So.
so true. That's so true. Oh my gosh, you are absolutely right. That is so true. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna blame it all on him.
Hey,
Blame it
so
all on him.
what are some of the future goals and some of the achievements that you're looking to achieve for your business?
Yeah, so future goals is to continue kind of doing the work that we do with clients. We focus on the neuroscience of leadership. We focus on the four domains of emotional intelligence, helping clients understand conflict management in the online environment, in the cross-cultural communications with such a diverse work population. We have to understand how different cultures agree, disagree, build trust, make decisions. And then more importantly, the focus on understanding the unconscious implicit biases in the interview process, either positive or negative. And, my training isn't focused on pointing out biases in other people. It's about that self awareness, that internal reflection, again, of what drives us. You and I, you mentioned you had an Impala, I have a Chevy. We have a similar to me bias right now. You're military, I'm pro military. We have a similar to me bias. But when you understand those things, and that's what we bring forth, there are no good or bad motives in any aspect of business. You have to understand what drives you, and that's really what we want to continue to do with clients in the future. We also recognize that we are kind of an executive consulting firm. So we work with larger companies, and we recognize that not all companies, especially small companies, may be able to afford our services. So Vera and I actually have been working and thinking about it. We just need to pull the trigger on doing kind of a subscription based program that's more focused for smaller companies or even individuals who just want to learn these particular principles and ideals in a way that is more cost effective for them. And we've also even talked about looking at uh, companies in general, but also looking and considering small Christian owned companies, because much of leadership and what we see of leadership, we can see emulated in Christ, and to helping those small business Christian leaders be able to advance and kind of continue moving their companies forward. And maybe they wouldn't be able to hire a consultant to do that, but they would still get some valuable information from a learning based platform from my company. So that's what we're doing. And of course we want to go global, right? And all that kind of stuff. So you got to think big, but that's really where we are.
I love it. That's the only way to go. I love that you guys have figured out where you are and where you need to go, and I think that's key to business. I also love that you guys are super, super, super driven. Like there's nothing that's holding you back, and I think you always have to have that like that forward mindset.
Yeah.
So as we get ready to close out here, you've shared tons of knowledge, tons of experience, tons of wisdom. And you talked about your childhood. You talked about your parents. You talked about your mental health. You talked about a lot of things that you bottled in and how you got through that. You talked about your faith and how God played a intricate role in your life. And then you talked about some of the struggles you had in business and how you overcame those things to running a business that's truly, truly, truly thriving right now. What are some advice that you could share with our listeners that are some key takeaways?
I think part of the key takeaways is own it in your life. I think that most of us don't want to acknowledge and accept failures. Um, I think that we all want to be able to succeed and achieve and do the best we can. But I think that we have to have a realistic observation of moments where we could have done things different. We could have done things better. We could have handled things better. And when you're in that moment, and I'm just going to speak to just leaders in general, I think that you have to acknowledge where you've had shortcomings and with your team. You know, I've had plenty of times where I've had to humble myself and apologize to my team, and I've got a great team who is actually very gracious and accepting in that situation. But I also think that you have to recognize that you have to look at your life like chess pieces. And you're the only person who can actually see the next move that you need to make. Yes, my faith guides me and I'm always going to go to God. But God can have a whole plan for me. But if I choose not to go on the path that He wants me on, well, then, that's a personal choice that I have to make as well. So I want you to think of your life as the chess pieces in your life. Where's your next move? Where do you see yourself? Reverse engineer of like, this is where I want to be. But in order to get here, I need to do X, Y, Z and start backwards and move forward and realize that be selective in who you have on the journey with you. I am very selective about the people that are in my sphere of influence. I only have a handful of people that I speak to and I 100% confide in. And those are people who are encouraging, who will tell me the hard truths when I need to, who will lift me up, who will be a support for me, who will share in my victories and be proud of me and happy for me. And I, in turn, do the same for them. It's important who you surround yourself with. And you have to believe that you can accomplish anything, even when the world tells you that you can't.
Wow. Thank you for that breath of wisdom that I know that our listeners will truly, truly take away and put in their pockets for gems. And also, they could also put those things into action as they're like real life, tangible things that you could actually do. I
Absolutely.
Thank you. So before we get out of here, if you would tell everyone how they could reach you, how they could contact you, how they could work with you. Before we get out of here, thank you.
Absolutely. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I know it's a very complicated last name, but I actually have a business platform on LinkedIn as well. So that's leaderessentialsgroup.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn here with this little banner that just came up. Also, you can send me a direct message on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect with anyone and schedule like a 15-minute virtual or telephone call with anyone. I would give you my email address, but it is so long and complicated. It's Christina at leaderessentialsgroup.com. And you can check out our website at www.leaderessentialsgroup.com and learn more about us, how we started, what services we offer, and see lots of different testimonials from people that we've worked with in the past and clients as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, guys, this is the end of the show. I'm your host, Michael Allison. I was joined today by Dr. Christina D. Until next time, we love you. Peace.
Thanks, Michael.
You're welcome.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no it come and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.